Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in again. We had a great time talking with Paul Geerling last time, but it is really a pleasure to be joined by, this time, our guest, Peter Prothero, who is joining me live all the way from somewhere in London, near London. Hey, Peter, thanks for taking some time to be with us today.
It's great to be with you, Joel.
How are you? Well, let's just jump straight into it, shall we?
Sure.
How are you doing these days in these crazy Corona times?
I'm doing well. I've definitely had to readjust my life because so much of my world is a world that is traveling from country to country and going to conferences and churches, and all of that stopped pretty much at the end of February. And so I had to completely rethink my world and my future for at least the next 6 to 9 months. So that was a major shift, but I'm doing well. I've created a little bit of a routine where I couldn't even go to the gym, and that was something I've been doing for 2 years now. But my daughter, who's a personal trainer, has set up some stuff in the garden, and so 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 4 times actually, I'm out in the garden. I'm keeping fit, and I'm loving that routine.
Well, that's good. Good on you. I'm still trying to work my way into any kind of fitness routine whatsoever, but that's good. I probably should have given a little bit of context for those people who might not be so up to date with what you're up to. Up until recently, you were the senior pastor of Equippers London, and recently, or some months ago, a while ago, you've taken a step of faith to sort of head into a different season. Maybe explain to some of us exactly what that season is.
Yeah, sure. So for 12 years, I led Equippers London, and we saw the Lord just really bless that church. We grew from about 35 people up to over 1,000. And so Mark Collard, who was our executive pastor and had been working right alongside me for 4 years, we put him in as the senior pastor. And so my role really transitioned to becoming part of what's called the Equippers Global Apostolic Team. So alongside Sam Monk and Bruce Monk and myself, we're really giving oversight to the Equippers churches around the world. And so my remit is primarily in Europe, though I travel to New Zealand, and I go to other places like Manila in the Philippines, and I've sort of been to India a few times as well. But really, it's about practically helping to give encouragement and development of the leaders in the European context. And so that's what I've been doing. Well, that's been developing over the last few years, but in November of last year, I was released to go into that. And that was a faith step for us, for Jackie and I, because we came off salary. And the idea was that part of the itinerant ministry would help to support us. And the church was just really fantastic, took up a special offering to launch us and things like that. But all of that changed with coronavirus.
I can only just imagine that adds a new dimension in this whole faith journey.
It did. And, the potential to start to worry and to get stressed and to become anxious was right there. It was like, on the doorstep. I just remember that scripture from Genesis 4 where God speaks to Cain. He said, sin is at the door. It's crouching at the door and it wants to master you, but you've got to master it. And I think we just were very intentional to say and remind ourselves that God had been faithful right up to now. And so really, through a combination of prayer and meditating on the faithfulness of God on Scripture, we found a place where we just had peace in the whole situation. And unbelievably, Joel, month by month, money comes in, either because friends just get touched or just say, the Lord spoke to me. And as a result of that, it's freed me to focus on writing. People have been asking me for years, have you published? Do you have a book? And it took me about 2 weeks to really push myself to sit in front of a computer and say, no, now I'm going to intentionally write. But after a day or two, I felt like I was getting downloads. I was just it was like a stream of consciousness. So I've already hit 31,000 words.
Wow.
And
Nice.
now I'm really pleased with that. Now I'm going through a sort of an editing process. So, and then the other thing that I've had to change, and it's been significant, is any kind of leadership development I'm doing like this online, and learning to work with that medium. And so, when I'm doing preaching, we're doing pre-recorded messages and sending those out. So it's a different way. And I'm having to learn a lot about technology in a very fast way. But we feel the grace in it, and we feel the peace of God in it. And those two things are, I think, just foundational.
Yeah. Isn't that often the way of God? We sign up for the faith of step we think, the step of faith we think that we're signing up for, but then it goes deeper and wider than we could have imagined.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's exciting that you're working on a book. I'm sure. I can't wait. I'm sure there's a few more steps to go through, but that's also very exciting news that there's something in the works.
Yeah, it is. And I understand now why God put Paul in prison. I don't think that guy would ever have written as much as he wrote if God hadn't done that. And so, with COVID-19, I feel like Paul at the end of Acts, he's got house arrest.
Yeah.
But he's writing, and so yeah.
Well, we pray that it doesn't end in the same fate as it did for Paul, but literally with the published works, that'll be good. So you're based in the UK. Obviously, I'm in Denmark, and I know that there will be people in many different countries watching this. Tell us a little bit about what's going on the ground there at the moment in the UK. What's the atmosphere, or what's life like, I guess?
It's interesting, Joel, because I'm in London. I'm in southwest London, so we're just within the periphery of what's called Greater London, and that's around about 10 million people, so double the size of Denmark.
Wow.
And that's where COVID-19, that's where the coronavirus has hit the hardest. And I think any city where you get density of population, like New York, London has been hit harder than anywhere else in the UK. And what's amazing to me is the openness that people have, because it's taken everybody by surprise. There's no real immunity to this thing. You stand a better chance if you're healthy and you're younger, but many families and many people are being hit by this with relatives. And of course, if you're in frontline services, especially if you're a doctor or a nurse, there's a level of exposure to this that is much more intense than most of us would experience. So I see tremendous openness and appreciation in people. In our own church, we've been able to spend roughly 20,000 krona. No, sorry, to 100,000 krona on feeding about 350 families. So we've connected with local schools, and we've said, where do you have families that can't eat, that can't afford food? And they put us in contact directly with those families. And now we've started working with other agencies to provide food. And so there's just great openness, great appreciation. I think there's a level of positivity in people. If you look at what's online, some of the creative things that people are doing, it's highly entertaining. It's just really good. But there is also, within all of that, I think, a level of fear and a level of anxiety that I haven't seen in a long, long time. And I think because of that, people are asking questions they would never ask. And so it's created an openness to spiritual things. So when we do our online services, we get loads of people saying, I'm first time visiting. They click the button, and that you have to be intentional to do that.
Yeah.
And they're even coming into our Zoom meetings So after we finish online with Facebook, we say, if you want to be in one of our lounges, please do this. That's another very intentional step people have to take.
That's a
But
great
we're
idea.
amazed. Yeah, we're amazed that people are doing that. And so there's it's a little bit like Charles Dickens wrote in the beginning of A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of reason, it was the age of madness. He goes on like that, and there's these contrasts going on all the time. That's what I see.
Is there, other than you've found yourself being an author, is there something unexpected that you found yourself doing in this lockdown time that's taken you by surprise?
Well, not really, because my world was always a world where I had to order my priorities and order my day. And that's something I've been pretty disciplined about for a number of years. And even as I went into the new phase last November, I'm very intentional about thinking through my days. So I don't think I've been caught by surprise, but I think I have been pleasantly surprised at how well things like online communication have served us and worked for us. When you can't do something that is a normal part of your routine, like something as simple as going to church once a week, you suddenly have to think, how intentional will I be to connect? And I think what has surprised me is the level of hunger and intentionality that people have shown. I did wonder, well, what will it be like now? And that has pleasantly surprised me.
Yeah. I guess it's not, I guess it's fairly public, but recently the University of Copenhagen did some research about what people are Googling at this time, and they've seen a surge in people searching about God and about faith. And you're right. I love how you use that quote about it was the best of times and the worst of times, because it literally is that in a sense for us as churches. I have a friend who has said to me a few times, he said, wow, it must be a really difficult time to be a pastor because you're so used to being face to face with people, and the art of ministry often is gathering people in community together. So personally, I find that a little bit difficult because I just love being in the room with people, but also that curiosity that you talk about is really a great and exciting time for us to be around as a church.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's happening with a lot of pastors is they're relearning how to have conversations. Because often in our busy world, conversations are on the run, or they're fast, they're short. Now, when you go either through FaceTime or something like this, because you want to check up on somebody, you really have to intentionally have a conversation. And I think pastors are relearning how to do that how to be present, and how to, there's no one else that you need to focus on, because it's this person on the screen, and you have to give it your full attention. And I think that's a great thing, actually.
Yeah, I have had I have had feedback similar to that, where some people have thought, wow, it's really nice that you're just calling me for the sake of calling me, and you're not inviting me to anything, or just having the time to genuinely check in on people's well-being, I think is a very positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been a fair amount of talk. I mean, any media channel, every platform, you name it, everyone's speculating about what's to come and really what is the genuine impact of this pandemic. But really, for us as believers and leaders, we are aware of these things. We keep a pulse on these things. But the real task for us is to work out what actually is God doing through this this time. And what are your thoughts? Like what do you think God is doing in this time through this season?
Yeah, it's really funny. I read a really funny quote on Facebook where it said, "Nature has told everybody, go to your room and think about how you've been living."
Wow.
And I really like that because I think God is using this to press a pause button.
Mm.
And I think whenever a pause button is pressed, the best thing we can do is reflect and just think about our life. I've had to do this with my life.
Mm.
Andy Stanley came up with a set of questions that really helped me a number of years ago. And they're basically three questions. In the light of your past experiences, in the light of your present set of circumstances, and in the light of your future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do?
Wow.
And I love that because it's three parts and each part is important.
Mm.
In the light of your past experiences. So in other words, you have to reflect because every choice in the past creates a trajectory of some kind. And it brings you to where you are today. And so you have to reflect on those choices and say, well, are you happy with where you are today? And if not, you have to look at those choices and reflect on them and analyze them to some degree. But then you have to look at your current set of circumstances. So, if you're somebody who's working and suddenly you're on furlough and you can't work, that's your current circumstance. And you might have to do an adjustment in the light of that. But you've also got future hopes and dreams. And so you take all those things into consideration when you make a decision that's a wise decision. And so I think this time is a time for people to pause and ask those kinds of questions and to deeply reflect. And then as a result of that, to make some decisions and choices. If the past choices have been bad, you've got an opportunity to stop that and to say, okay, things are now going to be different from now on. I'm now going to make some changes. But you have to make those changes, not just in the light of your future hopes and dreams, but in the light of your current set of circumstances. And so it has to be a compassionate decision because it could impact your wife, it could impact your kids, if you're a guy, or vice versa, if you're a woman, or if you're a child, it can impact your parents. So you sort of have to think of the impact of the choices you're going to make. But I think it's a time to reflect, to pause, and then to begin to create a new future by doing things now that will take you to that future.
Very good. What other positives come to mind when you think about what good can happen in the church through this process?
Well, I think that the real positive is it's not business as usual.
Yes, you can say that again.
Yeah, everything changed, stopped. We couldn't meet with our teams the way we did. We couldn't, we run a community coffee shop and stuff. All of it got shut down. We've had to put some of our staff on furlough. Suddenly, because it's not business as usual, you have to think to yourself, well, is this a question of toughing it out? And in Jeremiah 29, Jeremiah writes a letter to captives because they'd been taken away captive to Babylon, but there were a group of prophets saying, look, hunker down, batten the hatches, don't worry, we'll be back in Jerusalem in a couple of years. Just put up with it. And Jeremiah writes this letter in Jeremiah 29. He says, well, actually, it's not going to be a couple of years. They've been lying to you. It's going to be 70.
Wow.
And then Jeremiah says, here's what you need to do. You need to plant vineyards, dwell in houses, give your daughters in marriage, and increase in the land. And then he ends up with this lovely phrase, seek the peace of the city, because in its peace, you'll find peace. And so his message is radically different to the people who just said, hunker down. He's saying, no, rethink your entire future. And I think the positive for the church and for leaders in the church is some people are just thinking, well, when can we get back to normal? And I think that's very short-sighted.
Mm.
We don't know quite how long this will be. I hope it's over soon, but we don't know. And so I'm not making a plan that, oh, in a month's time, it's going to get back to normal. I'm thinking to myself, oh, if this lasts the next year, if things didn't change in terms of international travel now for someone like me, what could I put a plan in place? Could I somehow effectively fulfill my ministry, what I'm called to, but in a different way? And I think church leaders have got to look at what they're doing, and instead of going back to business as usual, they've got to think about, hey, this is the great opportunity to kill some ministries that weren't doing too well anyway. This is a great opportunity to, in a sense, reinvent ourselves and actually form a brand new set of priorities. And I think that's a massive positive. Whenever we get a chance to sort of to stop and rethink about the future and put some real creative thinking into it, I see that as a massively positive thing. And I think if we just have the mentality like they did in Babylon, just hunker down and let's just get through it, I think that's very short-sighted.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I don't just think that's a great thought. I feel like that's actually a word for many leaders and many churches. It is really that opportunity that we can take. And I don't know if you are a fan of Mark Sayers, and I've been listening to a lot of his podcasts or some of his teachings at the moment, where he is saying that this is a chance for a reboot. Normally you upgrade a machine when you switch it off and you reboot it again. And that's really a sense of conviction I think we can grab a hold of as a church. This is a moment where we can upgrade what we do and get more efficient and more effective as ministries.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with that thought completely.
Do you just before we go, do you have any other tips for leaders out there? Any general thoughts for leaders who are sitting watching this and living through this like we all are and wondering what else to do in this time?
Yeah, well, I mean, my tips are this, just be intentional about your day. Don't become a couch potato. Get up, in the morning, in the normal time you would normally get up. Go to bed at the normal time you go to bed, but really structure your day well. Have some time where you work on physical fitness. When Paul, people often quote to me, Paul said, bodily exercise profits a little. He said that in a culture where people walked everywhere and were fit. Miles and miles every day of walking. People were fit during Paul's day. What he was talking about is people who are excessive, who were like the Olympic Games type of athletes, who were just really obsessive about going to the gym. I'm not saying be obsessive, but I'm saying, hey, do some exercise, go for a walk, meditate, have some time of prayer with God while you walk. When I'm working out, I'm praying or I'm listening to worship. I'm engaging with God personally as much as I possibly can. But then use your day creatively. And for me, the mornings are the most creative times. And that's when I'm writing most, in the mornings. In the afternoons, I'm tending to do more editorial things, or I'm reading books. And I'm using this as an opportunity. I'm part of Blinklist, which gives a 15-minute summary of books. Well, I've read 28 books on Blinklist.
Wow.
So we need to be reading. We need to be taking stuff in. And then have a couple of hours in the evening. That's how I like to do it, where I watch a movie or I do something on Netflix or something like that. But just discipline the day and be intentional about it. And be in the discipline of preparing messages. If you're a pastor, don't stop preparing messages. Keep doing that. Keep working with that routine, but connect with people and really be a shepherd. Jesus said in John 10, my sheep know my voice and I call them by name. this is a time to really get connected with people and get to know, well, what's going on in their world, so that your messages dovetail to where your people, what they're journeying with in this season.
Absolutely brilliant. That is fantastic advice. For me personally too, that definitely stirs up some conviction in me, but I'm sure there's so much there that people, especially young and aspiring leaders, can grab a hold of there. And look, I'm just so thankful for your time and swinging by for a couple of moments for a chat.
You're really welcome, Joel. I love what you're doing with leaders, and just keep going, man.
Thank you so much, and I hope we get an opportunity to hear from you again soon.
Cool.
Thanks, Peter. Bless you.
Bless you too, man. I look forward to it.